My name is Carla Harris, and you're watching Feminomics TV.
The Fem-nominal Carla Harris has beaten the odds on Wall Street to become Vice Chairman for Wealth Management and Senior Client Advisor at Morgan Stanley. In 2013, President Obama appointed Carla to chair the National Women's Business Council. Carla is also an accomplished gospel singer and author of the book Expect to Win. Carla, welcome to Feminomics, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Really appreciate it. You talk about your mother and your grandmother being very important influences in your life, and we're all about women and money. So would you tell us about them?
My grandmother was very focused on money and a very good steward of money. She was a saver, she was an investor, and she was certainly someone who liked to make money.
You also talk about the church as an important influence to you growing up.
Absolutely. I grew up Catholic, was baptized Catholic when I was 3 months old, and then started actually singing in a Baptist church as well when I was in 8th grade.
And Unceasing Praise is your third album?
Unceasing Praise is the third album, and I would have to say that's probably the most special because every song on that album is original music. Most of the music was written by Sean Lucas, and there were a couple of numbers that were written by Mark Howell.
You often use sports analogies. Were you did you play any competitive sports?
I did, but not actually at the college level. I played competitive sports when I was in grade school, junior high, and also in high school.
We asked Carla, what lessons can women learn from playing sports?
There's 3 things in particular. Number 1, you learn the power of the team. And in this kind of environment that we're in, where innovation is something that we're all competing around, you need to be able to generate ideas. And generally, you won't always have the best idea. You won't always have the right idea. But if you can work within the context of a team, then you can get to the right idea. So sports really teaches you how to work with others in that team context to come up with the best output, whatever that output happens to be. The other thing I think it teaches you how to compete, no question, and it teaches you discipline. Because in order to be good at any sport, you have to practice, and you have to be committed and dedicated to the act of practicing, so that by the time it's time to perform, everything is really muscle memory, and your best actually comes to the fore.
You're ready for showtime.
You're ready for showtime, absolutely.
Talk to us about sports in terms of learning how to take a tough hit. And coming back.
Oh, sure. The thing that I think when things don't go the way you want them to go, the first thing to do is to analyze the situation, to say, okay, what happened here and what role did I play in this outcome? Because perhaps it was lack of preparation. Perhaps it was something you forgot to do. Perhaps it was a mistake that you made. And then perhaps it's none of the above. And there are things that happened that were beyond your control. And it's important to understand, recognize those, own that, and be able to move on. The second thing is, I think you should always remind yourself that every experience that we have gives you one of 2 things, a blessing or a lesson. Either you get that which you were going for, or you learn something that will inform your activity, your action the next time, so that you can be successful.
Speaking of sports and stats, as you know, there are a lot of ladies in waiting. Women comprise less than 17% of boards of director memberships today, and a paltry 3.2% of them are women of color. How do we improve those stats?
Well, I think I'm very hopeful that those stats will improve, and I'm bullish enough to say I think they'll improve in the next 5 years. Why? Because it is a very intense conversation that we're having in this country right now around women in leadership and around women on boards. And there are a number of organizations that have been born in the last 5 years that are specifically focusing on increasing the number of women represented on corporate boards. So I think the fact that we're talking about it and we're focusing on it and people are putting resources and energy behind it, then something will get done. It'll get done to the positive. That's number 1. Number 2, I think that the women that are on the boards now have a level of consciousness also about what they can do and their opportunity and their power to be able to influence that outcome. And I think people are more willing to do that now, again, because we have illuminated and elevated the conversation. And then lastly, I think that, you know, a lot of the work that's being done around women in STEM and focusing on having girls focus more on your math and science and technology, and encouraging girls to be entrepreneurs. And again, there's a lot of effort around that right now, and we're certainly going to try to do our part with the National Women's Business Council in having some of those conversations and talking about those kinds of issues. I think that will produce a larger number of young women who are interested in potentially becoming entrepreneurs at a much earlier age than women have been becoming entrepreneurs, over the last couple of decades.
Do you think, though, that it might also be a question of what else do we need to do incentive-wise to help companies? Because it's very clear, the research is there, it helps the bottom line. It's very clear that women definitely add value to businesses, and yet the numbers haven't changed in 5 years or more. And I'm wondering, what do we need to do to help the business community really take the next step and move forward? Because we do have the bench, as you know.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we can do, though, is to raise the level of visibility around the bench. Because the thing that you still hear when you raise the question is, oh, we can't find any, right? Where are they? So I think to the extent that, we do our part in raising the level of visibility around the bench, so that it's not an easy thing for someone to say I can't find any, because each of us can say, oh, I have 5 that I'd like to talk to you about, or I have 3 that I'd like to tell your executive search firm. Do you know these 3 women? And perhaps you should take them to lunch and make sure that they're in your pipeline. I think those are some of the things that we can do.
Terrific. I know you also talk about in helping bring this bench along, the roles of advisor, mentor, and sponsor.
Absolutely. And I talk about the advisor, the mentor, and the sponsor. And the advisor is anybody that you can ask a question of. But that mentor really needs to be somebody that you trust, somebody that knows you very well, somebody that will give you the real deal feedback and not just, the politically correct or polite response. And the sponsor is the person that's going to carry your paper into the room. And when I first started in my career, I did not understand the role of a sponsor. You didn't hear anybody talk about sponsorship. You heard people talk about advocates, but nobody talked about it in the real tangible way that you really need a sponsor. And that is somebody who's going to actively use their capital on your behalf.
Right. And I think you make such a good point about that so many of the key decisions that happen about your career happen when you're not in the room.
Absolutely.
And therefore to invest your capital, as you say, in those relationships and developing those.
Yes.
How?
Yes, well, the way you do it, and it's very interesting, thank you for that question, because so many people say to me, but I don't know how to get a sponsor. Every single person has built a relationship somewhere. If you've lived past 5 years old, you have created a relationship. And I tell people it's no more difficult than the way you create a relationship in your personal life, and that is frequency of touch. If I want to have a relationship with you, then I'll come by your office and say, hey, I know that you guys were talking about X. I found an article that you might be interested in. Just want to share this with you. Or, hey, I'm going down to get a cup of coffee. Can I grab you one while I'm going? And then when you deliver the coffee, there's an opportunity for a 5 or 10 minute conversation. Or I'm having this particular challenge. Can I spend 10 minutes with you? And I'd like to get your perspective on how you think I might handle that. So that frequency of touch is what's the basis for the relationship, and then you continue to invest in it.
Another one of Carla's pearls, and I'm wearing my pearls, I would add, is authenticity.
Yes.
And I would love it if you would share the story of how you won the Burger King account.
Well, I'll have to tell you that anytime you talk about account investment banking, it's a lot of people that's a part of that effort. But one of the things, the story that I like to tell, is being at the pitch and actually singing a jingle with the CEO over in the corner when we're grabbing some coffee. And the whole point of authenticity is that every single person has their own unique set of skills, your strengths and your weaknesses, and it's the thing that makes you you. And when you bring the real you to the table, you allow someone else to really connect with you, and you give yourself the opportunity to own and impact that relationship in a way that no one else can, because no one else can be you. So the last thing you should do is to submerge that which is really you, because you'll create a competitive disadvantage for yourself. Your authenticity is your competitive advantage, and you should seek to underscore that in every situation and bring the real you to the table.
Carla, you were appointed late last year to chair the National Women's Business Council. Will you tell us about the council? It's 25th year, I believe,
yes,
and its mission and what you're focusing on.
Yes, it was born in 1988 as a result of the legislation that was passed that year, and the council's mission is to be a consultative body to the White House, to the SBA and to Congress around issues as they relate to women entrepreneurs. And I'm very excited about where we are now, because I think this is a perfect storm for women leaders and for women entrepreneurs, this environment that we're in now. And there are 4 things that this council is going to focus on. The first one is access to capital, because as you know, Lisa, that continues and has been a major impediment for women entrepreneurs and creating scale. But we want to continue to focus on access to capital. We want to focus on access to markets and making sure that women continue to have access and further penetrate the federal procurement market as well as international markets. We want to focus also on access to jobs, and that really is all about scale and high growth businesses. Because one of the interesting things that I find is that we talk about women entrepreneurs, but then the conversation shifts when a woman owns less than 50% of her business. And in my mind, if you want to create scale and obviously accelerate job creation, then a woman may have to raise capital and she will dilute herself. So why is it less important for us to talk about a woman entrepreneur if she owns 52% versus 32%, right? So we should make sure that we expand the conversation around women leaders as well as women entrepreneurs. And then the 4th thing we're going to focus on is data capture, because obviously you can manage what you can measure, and we really should make sure that we get the data that was from the latest census, get that out into the marketplace so that we can really understand how women businesses are doing, particularly in these kind of economic environments.
Women, as you know, save less than men, yet we live longer and we earn less. So how can we improve the stats on helping women to save more?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that we're already starting to see some improvement. It started to tick up. The overall savings rate is starting to tick up, and women's savings rate is starting to tick up. And the thing that I'm very bullish about, again, in this environment, is if you think about where we are now, where we're going, you know, I think the stats say that women are going to control something in the neighborhood of $2 trillion by 2020. That is 6 years from now, Lisa. Women already control 85% of the purchasing decisions today.
Absolutely.
And are approaching 60% of the graduates, you know, with respect to graduate degrees and undergraduate degrees. I think it's 56% or something this year. So I think that, again, as we look out 5 years from now, you'll see a market change with respect to the level of savings rate. But I do think there's a lot of work that we can do, again, to educate young women and young professionals around budgeting, around investing, and really, you know, financial, I'd say financial literacy broadly. We need to integrate that backwards into the schools and start even earlier in teaching people, both women and men, about the importance of saving.
Carla, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lisa.
Keep up with Feminomics by subscribing to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. I'm Lisa Kaess. We'll see you next time, right here on Feminomics. If you had the opportunity to do something completely different, what would that be?
Perhaps I would open a hamburger joint.
Burger King franchise?
Right. I would open a hamburger establishment, and if it was an adult establishment, I would obviously have what I might have cocktails that I like to call big girl drinks.
That's all right. She is on the money tonight.